So we're recording. So Dot, I guess what I'm going to do now is turn it over to you. I'll just say that we have a total of 44 people in attendance. That counts the 8 panelists. So
okay, great. Thanks, Rod. I'll get you to put the panelists on the screen, and while I'm making opening remarks, we'll get ready for the next phase. To all our viewers and participants today, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time to participate in the stewardship of your church by joining us virtually in this really historic annual congregation meeting. This is our first webinar type ACM. And while we really miss being in the kitchen, hearing the clanging of cups and us getting cake in fellowship before an ACM, we hope that maybe in 2022 that we'll be back there for a more in-person ACM. When we last gathered on the 23rd of February, 2020, the prospect of indoor church gatherings being closed and places of worship being closed was not on our horizon. Yet a month later, that's exactly where we were. Though the challenges of 2020 have been extraordinary and definitely one for the history books, you'd be pleased to learn during this meeting that OUC pivoted quickly, responded with incredible resolve, and truly it was a remarkable year. That said, I'd like to officially welcome you to the 2021 ACM. Your council and ministry teams look forward to your prayerful guidance and to building on the successes of 2020. And we are grateful that you have joined us today, because together we are OUC Strong. On that note, I see that we have 46 participants, that as a congregation of greater than 100 voters, we must have at least 20 voters. We have surpassed that amazingly, as we expect. So I'm able to declare a quorum, and I can formally call this meeting to order. Next order of business is, or the first one is simply to review the meeting process now that everyone has joined us, and some administrative details. Ron, would you like to take us through the first step, and I'll take us through the consent?
sure, I'm glad to do that. So just want to cover a few kind of meeting process things. So the first one is that we have Dave Clemes helping us out as the person who's watching the Q&A and the chat. And so what we're proposing to do is, if you have a question, you know, when we get to a presentation, we're going to ask that you can submit questions through the Q&A. And then when the presenter is finished, then Dave will read back the questions to the presenter, and we'll get those questions answered. So we actually prefer you to use Q&A for questions. And then when it comes to the chat function, that's more for alerting us to some kind of, you know, technical issues, like having trouble hearing or, you know, things of that nature. So and not really put your questions in through chat is what I'm asking. Then the other thing is to let you know that we did provide you a summarized budget before the meeting. So we're hoping that you had a look at that. And thirdly, we're going to try something out new this year. In the agenda that we sent you, there was something called a consent portion of the agenda. And what we're doing there, pardon me, is we have 8 items that are sort of non-controversial, routine types of motions. And rather than what we've done in the past, which is have individual motions for each of those kinds of things, we're putting them together in a group. And what we're suggesting is that when we get to the motion to approve the agenda, that you would also be agreeing to those 8 things. So when Dot goes through the agenda, she's going to read those 8 things back and just make sure that you're aware of what they are. And she's going to ask you whether you have any objections to having those included in the motion to approve the agenda. So if, let's just say somebody does have an objection to one of those 8, then the way we would handle that is we would then make that particular thing an agenda item and have a motion on the, separate motion on that. So that's it, Dot.
Great, thanks, Ron.
You want me to put up the agenda now? Or?
Please, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
So formally, we can say that due notice for the meeting was published well in advance, so life and work emails and the registration process. So that detail has been dealt with. The second point that I would like to mention is that we're in virtual format, so I can see the panelists, but we can't see any of you. So this is new for all of us. I'd like you to know that, and I know it's new for you. So we're going to be grateful and kind throughout this. And I hope that you'll understand that in this meeting agenda, we've done everything we can to ensure that your voice has been heard, that your guidance will be acknowledged, of course, in the planning and the future direction of the church. The next part is the consent agenda. As I read the consent items formally, I would also say that you can look a little bit further down and note that in the main agenda items, we have a looking back portion. We have a looking forward portion where we do the approvals of the proposed budget. And then we will be handling all your questions. And those include all the questions that were sent to us ahead of time. And so that you know that we've received them and they'll be acknowledged and responded to, we hope, through the presentations or during the question and answer phase. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, please send them to us and we'll deal with them at that time. Okay. At this time, I would like you to, as I read the consent portion of the agenda, that you can also start your voting on the motion to adopt the ACM agenda. So do I have someone to move the agenda? Because I'm going to read the consent portion as you're voting, if that's all right.
Yeah, we already have a mover, and that's
moved by Lynn Stout.
Yeah.
Second by Debbie Birch. Is she here?
I think she is. Yeah.
Okay. And as you vote, I will be reading the consent portion of the agenda. First motion is that we assign the roles of chair and secretary of the meeting to myself, Dot Cooper, and Lynn Stout as secretary. We agree to giving adherents the right to vote. That's the vote of motion of enfranchisement. We agree that voting will be done electronically. We are empowering council to fill vacancies that might arise after the ACM by appointment on a as required basis. We're endorsing Janet Neal with gratitude as OUC's volunteer associate minister. We're endorsing the licensed lay worship leaders, and I read those: David Clements, Heather McGrath, David Patterson, Allison Sales, and Marnie Hunt Stevens. We are endorsing the trustees as listed in the appendix, and they are listed as Craig Bader, Nancy Burchard, Gary Boyd, Cheryl Holden, and David Patterson. And we are endorsing the ERRC representatives, specifically Debbie Birch, David Patterson, Paul Sales, and Sandra Sales. You have on your screen the voting poll. You vote for the motion. Please submit. And Ron, if you could let us know how the voting is going.
Yeah, we have, we're almost done here, I think.
Perfect.
So I'm now going to, we have 47 of 49 have voted. So let's just end that and we will share the results. So the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Well, that was history. Okay, we have, next I'm going to call on Carolyn for a moment of reflection.
You want to stop sharing, Dot?
And so thank you, Dot. More of an opening prayer and just a few wee words of reflection. And part of what I am looking at as I formulate this reflection and prayer is page 37 of the annual report, which lists the baptisms, the marriages, and the funerals or memorial services that were conducted in the passing year. We have come through an extraordinary time. I know that we have used that word over and over again in terms of what it's been to live with and at the effect of COVID. And yet it's true. It has been an extraordinary year marked by, oh goodness, a great deal of loss. And as Molly reflected on in her sermon this morning, and as Mike reflected on in his welcome, it is a Lent like no other, at least in terms of what we have all lived as one season falls into the next. And so we have already lost a great deal and sacrificed a great deal for the common good, for the good of neighbor, for the good of loved ones, for the good of our church family, of our wider community, our city, and so on. And so I want to take a moment and just ask us to be present to that, be present to all the changes and all that has been asked of us. Don't worry, I won't leave you there. Take a moment and be present to what this year has meant for you, for your family, for OUC, for your neighborhood, for the city. And then I want to ask you to take a moment and think about all the surprise, joyful moments, the surprise blessings, the moments where you felt like you could see a silver lining, where somehow the sun was bursting through the clouds, where you felt present to hope, and you felt present to joy, and you felt present to love, and you felt present to gratitude. And in that spirit of gratitude, I invite you now to join me in prayer. Holy One, we gather this afternoon full of emotion, full of thoughts, full of hopes and questions, wonderings about what may be around the corner. And as we do, we give you great thanks, for you have been good to us, faithful with us. You have held us and guided us, given us the gift of your presence and your grace, and we, your people, have persevered. We have faced loss. We have faced the loss of loved ones, including Edwin Morton, Glenn Cowie, Trevor Fox, and Jean MacDonald. And they leave a void in our lives, and we are grateful for their memories, or for the memory we have of them, and for the way in which they blessed our community. And we know that they are resting in and with you for all time. And for that, we give you thanks. We give you thanks, dear God, also for other milestones, other moments in the life of our faith community where we saw joy and hope and love and grace burst through. In the marriage of Dave Eagles to Jane Hillman, and the marriage of Alexander Stephen Byers to Rhea Lee Molinar, and in the baptism of Weston Umberto Richards, we saw you, dear God. And we are grateful for those moments that crack open a glimpse into your divinity and your love of us. We give you thanks for the community of faith that is Orléans United Church. We give you thanks for the continued participation, the encouragement, the faithfulness of each and every one of our members and adherents. Together, dear God, and with you, we are so blessed. Be with us as we meet this afternoon. Guide us and hold us in the palm of your hand. Help us to make good and wise decisions on behalf of your church in this part of the world. We ask all of this in the name of your Son, our friend and Savior, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carolyn. With that, we can now move to our next agenda item, which is the minutes of the last ACM. I'll call on Lynn.
Thanks, Dot. Good afternoon, everyone. We did have a few revisions to the minutes this past week, which have been made and put into a new version. So I would now ask if there are any other revisions or omissions that need to be identified and noted, and move that we move the draft minutes from February 23rd, 2020 ACM to be adopted. Do we have
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Lynn. I'm just waiting to see if there's anything that anybody's sending. No? Then I'll say moved by Lynn Stout and seconded by George Tether that the minutes of the 2020 ACM held on February 23rd, 2020 be adopted. So please vote for or against the motion now.
Looks like the voting is completed, so we'll share those results. Motion carried.
Motion carried. Thank you. The next agenda item is a review of our highlights from the 2020 annual report. Now, this is where I have to show my my technical skills. So there's going to be a share screen for me, and then somehow I'm going to see if I can get this up. Let's see. That's not true. How does that look for you, Ron? Good?
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you. So on that note, I'm going to be managing my own slides, which is a new skill for me. So thank you. So bear with me. I wanted to say that the 2020 annual report entitled A Year of Resilience and Change was really a testament of the collective strength of our congregation's faith. It really is a celebration of our adaptability, our resilience, our creativity. And in fact, it's a testament to our clergy for them rising to an occasion with aplomb, for venturing courageously into a new world, really, to our ministry teams who rebounded so quickly onto Zoom and gave us the wisdom that we needed, even though we could not come together. And it really is a celebration of all our volunteers and our congregation of faith. It is this amazing report, and I really hope that you'll see through these highlights of just how blessed we have been. In February 23rd, when we had the 2019 ACM 2020, I guess I'd put it, we didn't see that we would be closed. Yet within 30 days, we had to quickly form a response team. We made decisions to have our very first live stream worship. Within 2 weeks, we had 7 churches come together to create Virch and a premiere. And at this stage, you've got to know that the Daves were nudging and anchoring and is showing us the possibilities of technology. Our buildings were closed, and we have Ron as our incoming chair, as our property chair, doing all the things necessary to communicate with our use and occupancy groups, with our property to close down in a wise way. And yet at the same time too, we as individuals are organizing our own lives to go into a stay-at-home state of emergency. So those 30 days, I will have to say, were remarkable and one for the history books. We set ourselves some priorities though. Our priorities very quickly were that we were going to have weekly worship by leveraging technology, that we were going to stay connected as best we could in all the ways possible, and that we would communicate and throughout, if we could, seize opportunities, set no boundaries, and be creative. So what did we do? Well, we had, as the report announced, an all-member pastoral call-in. Our ministries moved online, and communications were a huge success. We had bi-weekly update emails. Thank you, Lynn, for being the grafter, the writer in behind. We had a social media guru in Molly and many others. We went from that to Note from the Revs to the Life and Work newsletter, testing new things, trying new things, photos, pictures, seeing what we could be. We had a new ministry in adult education and health promotions, creating coronavirus connections, a blessing. And we launched in December a new Life and Work newsletter on a platform with a new piece of work. And Kim Grattan really rose to the occasion, says, I will learn this. We were blessed. Worship. Well, the Virch name came from Ian Richardson, and it stuck. It stuck. We were surprised when the churches in our community came to us and say, you know, what can we do together? Well, we didn't know, but that's been a blessing. Our global viewers, well, we're reaching out to Australia, Switzerland, the United States, all over the place. And in some weeks, we've had as high as 750 viewers in 1 week. And I know it's a staple in our house, although I do admit I'm usually in my jammies. And, you know, I can be doing a few other things while I'm attending Virch. It's different, but it's exactly what we needed. We found out that we're stronger and more united as a faith community with our other churches, and we were blessed by the days. Music, I have to acknowledge that over 130 music videos have been created by Scott. And this was not easy. This takes a lot more time than coming to church on a Sunday and playing the music that he's familiar with, following his choir practice. So the amount of extra work Scott has done is insurmountable. 64 general hymns, the Advent selections, the preludes and the postludes, and a number of other solos. And he is very grateful, as are we, to the Virch production team, the soloists, and the Advent singers. Our learning ministry, another blessing. Virtual Sunday school. Oh my goodness, the kids are just delighted. And I must admit that sometimes I want to go to Sunday school too. Our adult education, health promotion, coronavirus connections. They have done programs, the cannabis program, the LGBTQIA, and Two Spirited Plus Plus. They did a session on wills and powers of attorneys. They are very happy with the first aid kits, inventory, and travel kits. And I can tell you from food production, we were happy that the first aid kits were done. Reverend Dr. Glenn Stout for spiritual direction and all his work helping with our faith journey needs to be acknowledged. Our contemplative prayer group with Reverend Janet, and of course our children's panage. Who knew how much fun they would have? And thank you, Marnie Hunt Stevens, for just putting that together. Our Healthy End of Life project, help. Not quite as visible day to day because they don't have meetings with the congregation and we're not in person, but they've done huge work this year. And I can't wait till we're back in person so that everybody else can just see and exchange through fellowship all the good work that's being done even throughout this pandemic. They've been reaching above their target. They have done what the research has asked them to do. They've been speaking to 169 unique participants. They've done their focus groups. 44 participants from OUC contributed to that. And in 2021, their goal is to begin to dream and implement practical applications from the research. Now, our two people that are part of our congregation that are key to this are Heather McGrath, Emily Davidson, and of course, Sue Horrocks, who is the chair of our advisory board. So look forward to more on the Healthy End of Life project, the HELP project in 2021. Pivot Plus, the new pivot. Oh my goodness. If you last year at this ACM that we would be doing e-transfers, there wasn't a possibility. This is clearly a leap of faith and really reaching beyond. So kudos to the Finance Committee on e-transfers and really doing all the work on the federal programs. They've been going nonstop. Our Property Committee for their guidance on the reopening task force and getting kitchen electrical done. We're ready to reopen. Our online Christmas market were just amazing in saying, yes, we can do this. They shifted to using the Shopify platform and over 6 weeks of work of delivering the market and another weeks and weeks of work ahead of that, over $33,000 raised in fundraising. And when I list names, I will miss key leaders, but I have to say 3 names: Janet Weatherston, Ken Richardson, Jean Shattuck, and then all the leaders that put this together. There is an army of volunteers that go into this. we are very strong. And in Pivot Plus, I have to thank our congregation. You are the big success. You are the success that brought us through this year of pandemic with a smile, with a plum, and knowing that we will come out the other side actually being a stronger, better, more vibrant congregation and church. I truly believe this. So please read the annual report, A Year of Resilience and Change, for more success stories. The report has been emailed to you or to everyone on the contact list. We apologize for any, the typos and the errors and whatever. We do our best. And we have many readers. We have editors that did their work. So don't be too hard on us. And there are some hard copies available in the bin for those who don't have, who need one, and of course, who don't have access to email. Go right ahead. So in sum, all I want to say is in 2020, we've been a blessing. We are a blessing, and we continue to feel and know that we are blessed.
Dot, I have a couple of questions here for you.
Okay, thank you.
The first is from Anne-Marie Humanuck, who said, I don't know where it fits in, but I'd like to report that the OUC Book Club continued virtually throughout 2020, providing community connections within OUC. The second is from Luc Lamontagne.
I got it. We got it.
Sorry. Likely some assumptions have been made about COVID and COVID recovery in 2021 for the purposes of setting a budget this year. Do you have any idea on the assumptions, or do you want to leave that till the budget?
We're going to leave that till I think the budget and our priorities. If you could bring that forward.
Will do.
And as for the book club, that is certainly noted for the minutes. Okay. There being no requirement to do anything more to the annual report, I'd like to call on Alex to review the 2020 financial report. Alex is going to go on to share screen, so there'll be just a little second here.
All right, are people seeing this? Well, I'm not hearing you say yes, but I can read your lips.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So once again, it's my pleasure to review the past year by presenting highlights from our financial statements. I gotta say, it is a pleasure to do once again this year, because the generosity of the congregation, as well as the federal government, means that we've had a really good year financially. So I'm pleased to present these financial statements because it's good news. I will answer Craig's answer or question about he had a question about the memorial fund. Rightly or wrongly, the memorial funds that come in pass through to the trustees, and they're under their safekeeping. I can report that $1,050 came in during 2020 and has been passed along to the trustees for their custodianship. Now, rightly or wrongly, I confess I did not check the trustees' report to see whether they've reported on the balance. No money came back in from the trustees. We didn't put out a call. Council did not put out a call to the trustees for a payment of memorial funds back from the Celebration and Memorial Fund. So, but during the year, we did have $1,050 come in that was passed along to the trustees for their custodianship. All right, so this review of the financial statements is going to go, I'm just going to point out some highlights of the financial statements as if I was reading through them from the balance sheet to the schedules. There's 8 slides. If you have questions, please refer to the slide number on the bottom right for your question, and that'll make going back easier if we need to. Okay, next slide. So my things I wanted to point out here are the cash in the bank, 209,842 at the end of 2020, and 207,000. I need this, pictures of people is blocking. Okay, 207,937 at the end of 2019. So that's about the same. The our short-term investments, these are guaranteed investment certificates in the bank that we hold with the TD Bank, went from 4,400 to 95,000. And you'll see why in presently. Our accounts receivable went from almost 25,000 at the end of 2019 to only almost 5,000 at the end of 2020. And that was mostly due to a decrease in the receivables. At the end of 2019, we had a bunch of money coming from the restorative care program and also a big HST rebate because of all the work we'd done on the tower takedown. Okay, those to me were the highlights from the balance sheet. Next, looking at the income statement, the top side of it is the revenues. This is money that came in. So great job, congregation. We exceeded in 2020 the budget to 93,900. We exceeded that by a little bit, and we also exceeded what came in 2019. Although we did have 13,000 there come in from Rose Legacy's bequest. Where we really suffered because of COVID was the rentals, use and occupancy. It went from 75,663 in 2019 down to only 28,000. So went down by more than half. And we had budgeted 74,000 and only came in, only 28,000 came in. On the fundraising side, it was also a lot less, but still 33,706. And a whole lot of that, it was even more than that, but a whole lot of what we recognize it's donated for the bazaar. And that goes as a fundraising expense, and it comes in as gift in kind. So in cash, it was actually more than that in cash. But for accounting rules tell us we present the fundraising net of the expenses. Okay, in the previous year, we had the 40 for 40 tower campaign. That didn't happen this year. But because of COVID, the government helped us out through 10,000 worth of forgivable loan and wage subsidies. The 10% part of it that they started out with, 5,500 almost, and then another 37,000 through the regular, what became, some people call it the 75% program, but basically there's a formula that you plug in the numbers to a spreadsheet and it tells you how much. So that's, we got a lot of help from the government with their COVID help through forgivable loan and subsidies. All right, and of course the HST rebate was less because we didn't have all that HST rebate money coming in. Right, the next slide. Next, on the expenditure side, our payroll was a little bit more than last year, but still considerably less than we had budgeted. And that was because of the restorative care payments that came in. when Reverend Molly was off at the beginning of the year. And we also didn't use the travel budget fully. In the programs and operating spending was a lot less, 13,400 in programs in 2019 versus 7,600. Well, we just weren't in the building. We weren't spending money on Sunday school curriculum and this kind of thing. The operating was a lot less, 121,000 the previous year versus 86. Most of that was from reductions in the custodial payments, custodial expenses, and utilities. We were just using less natural gas and less hydro to keep the building going. Of course, we didn't take down another tower in 2020, so that expense doesn't exist. And so the bottom line there, revenues less expenditures, we had about a $42,000, 750 surplus before we count the outside ministries. So moving along. And this is mostly, special funds is what mostly mission and service and food banks. It did well, not quite as well as the previous year, 33,550 versus 40,000 the previous year. And the reduction was mostly in the mission and service. And then we paid out 35. We took a couple $1,000s from the benevolent fund, and we sent 500 each to the 2 food banks, 500 for the Interchurch Refugee Fund, and 500 to the anti-racism initiative in support of the Black Lives Matter during the summer. So the bottom line, after outside ministries, a $40,755 surplus. Who would have thought during a year with all the challenges we had that we could pull off a surplus? Fantastic. A couple more things to look at. These are our short-term investments. The 95,500 that shows up on the balance sheet. 50,952 is in our capital repair fund, and the proceeds from the CEBA loan, Canada Employment Business Account, Employer Business Account. We got a $40,000 loan from them. We only have to pay back 10,000, but we took that and put that into a contingency fund just in case we run into problems. And then of course we have the piano fund. Next slide. This is our long-term debt. So there you see we've already recognized the $10,000 of forgiveness. We borrowed 40, we only have to pay back 30. It's interest-free. We don't have to pay it back until the end of 2022. We still have the church extension loan, but we paid it down by almost $17,000. It's still got a balance of $73,046. And if we continue with the same payments we're making now, it'll be paid off in 2023. The McKendree loan is the last one. It doesn't start getting paid until we've paid off everything else. We had good news from the region recently that our interest expense for 2021 is only going to be 0.16%. That means we're only paying $160 for the whole year on 100,000. And the last slide is our deferred revenue. So these are the monies that have come in that we're saving till we can use them for their intended purpose. So at the beginning of the year, there was 1,778 from women's retreat. That got increased by 150. So there's 1,928 available to the folks organizing the women's retreat. The benevolent fund started the year with 5136. Remember, we paid out 2,000 to support various causes, plus other amounts. But other people made donations. So net only had, it only decreased by 837. So we still have almost 4,300 in the benevolent fund. The bequests from Rose Legacy that came in at the end of the last year, they're still there. We haven't touched those yet. And that's my last slide. We're in good financial shape. I'll let Bernie deliver the bad news later with the budget. If there's any questions, I will give up screen share.
You might want to keep that on there in case
okay.
We have to refer back to it.
Okay.
Are there any questions out there?
Not on the 2020 report. There are questions on the 2021 budget.
Well, then I'm going to say thank you for that. There is a need for have a motion to accept Alex and the Finance Committee's wonderful 2020 financial report. I have here that it's moved by Alex and seconded by Ron Hunt. I'm calling for the vote now.
The vote's coming in.
Votes are coming in.
Good job, Alex.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like it's settled down here, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we have the motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thank you to all our registered participants out there. You're doing an amazing job. I mean, really, really thank you for letting us move forward on this annual congregational meeting. It's now time to shift from looking at the past to now looking forward. And to set the stage, I'm going to call on Ron Hunt, and he's going to screen share. And we're going to look at council's priorities, which really means all our ministry team priorities for 2021. Over to you, Ron.
Thank you, Dot. So let me just preface this with a few sort of opening remarks. So if we kind of say, well, you know, what's the current situation? We've been through 2 waves of COVID-19, and you know, there's probably going to be a third, which is what we're being told. We've got the worrisome reality that we have COVID-19 variants out there, which kind of, you know, raises the risk level. On the other hand, we've recently, Ottawa has been recently put into the orange restrict mode. And that means that we can have groups back in the church, up to 50 people in the church at the same time. And my phone was ringing off the hook last week with groups that want to do that. I had my first meal in a restaurant on Monday or Tuesday, the 16th of February, right? So there are some possibilities. And I think, and what will come up in the presentation is that the net result of the last almost 12 months of the pandemic is that church life has definitely changed. And so you're going to see this reflected on one of our priorities for the coming year. So let me just move along here. So what I'd like to do is just give you a brief overview on how council arrived at what we're suggesting are the priorities that we should be focusing on. Tell you about those recommendations, and they fall out really into 2 buckets, if I can use that term. A couple of strategic priorities, and then a couple of things which support those strategic priorities and help us survive and thrive as a church. And then Bernie asked me to also incorporate the thoughts on the capital budget and how we would prioritize that in 2021. So I know Craig had submitted a question on this. So Craig, I think we're going to give you an answer to that. So how did we go about this? Well, it's hot off the press, really. We had a special brainstorming meeting on Tuesday night, February the 9th, we being the council. And our jumping off point was the 2019 goals assessment report that Paul Wynot spearheaded. And he kind of, I think, presented the first version of that report in August of that year. So what we did is we kind of looked at the goals that were in there and kind of did an accounting. We sort of reflected on the ones that had been completed. Some had been partially completed. Some, we thought maybe should go in the parking lot. And then a few others actually acted as seeds to what we should be focusing in on in 2021. And I thank Carolyn for doing the analysis that helped us start off our discussion with that awareness. So from there, we went into sort of a brainstorming session and a bunch of other ideas came up. So we ended up with about 7 different potential ideas. And, that's too many to really be called a list of priorities. So we felt, well, we need to narrow that down to a workable number. So we did that, and here's the result. So there's really 2 overarching priorities for 2021 that we're recommending to the ACM this afternoon. The first one being develop a community connection and reintegration strategy, which ties right into the fact or the reality that church life has changed. And then the second one is a recommendation that we develop and implement a post-pandemic recovery plan. And with Lynn's help, when we kind of got this, Lynn said, I'm going to go have a look at this and see how it maps back to the 5 ministries. And both goals touch all 5 of the ministries. So I'm talking about worship, learning, care, outreach, and resource. So right there, it tells you that we probably picked the right 2 major goals because we're affecting the entire church. So I'm not going to go into detail on these 2. And Molly, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to speak to goal number 1, because you were the one who really championed this. So
that would be my pleasure. The goal comes from the understanding that in this pandemic time, we have had to reimagine how we do just about everything, how we do school, how we do work, how we do community building, how we do relationships. And so we also need to reimagine how it is that we do church. We have seen our church pivot in such an exceptional way that we realize now that we can expect in the time to come, when there will be the possibility of joining again together in actual physical presence for worship, that there will be a segment of our population, for a variety of really valid reasons, who will choose to continue to connect with us in a solely virtual way. And so that means not just they will attend church virtually on Sunday mornings, but they will also want to participate with us in our other programs and ministries in a virtual way. We also recognize that as we think about what it means to reintegrate into life in the public sphere, there's going to be lots of challenges for us. I think that this pandemic has caused a great deal of social anxiety, not just for our children, but for our big people as well. I think that we have seen this as schools have gone back into class, and some of the challenges that schools have faced, and they're kind of a microcosm of what everything else is going to be facing as we try to reintegrate. It also brings us opportunities. I say to some people that perhaps this pandemic, while we would not have wished it on anyone, and while it has been such a challenge, may also have been a kick in the seat of the pants of the church that we needed, such that we have reached a place that we may not have ever found ourselves in. But because we have had to change and adapt and reimagine how it is that we can be God's people and be a community in a virtual way, we may have some opportunities here for ministry and for reaching people that we never could have imagined before. And so the thought is that we need to, as a whole congregation and as leadership, as the council and as ministry teams, need to be thinking about what life is going to look like post-quarantine. And we're not trying to set an end date on that because we don't know that. But what we do feel is we have the advantage right now. We didn't have the advantage of knowing what it was going to be like heading into this last March. We have the advantage of knowing now that there will come a time that we will be together again. And we have the space now to think about how we can plan for that well. And so some of the questions I think that we as individuals and as a faith community need to think about is who is part of our OUC family or faith community? Who are our neighbors? Who are we reaching? And we can draw that circle so much wider now that we have opportunities for virtual connection. How can we create community that is a hybrid of both in-person and online membership? So how do we make sure that people feel a part of the family, no matter how it is they engage with OUC? How do we reimagine the possibilities for sharing God's goodness with each other in this post-quarantine church, in this new world that we are heading into? And how is it that we're going to be together, just physically be with each other, emotionally be with each other, spiritually be with each other, both in person and online, so that we can maintain our sense of community and connection and care for one another? We have been trying really hard this past year to figure out ways to do that. And I think we need to continue to be focusing on that. So these are some questions that I would invite us to think about. In order to realize this goal of reimagining ourselves, I think we need to focus on OUC's capacity for virtual presence. And so that doesn't just mean on Sunday mornings, but in general, how do we open up all of the ministries that we offer so that we can have a greater virtual presence? How do we plan for what Sunday mornings are going to look like at Orléans United? And that's from everything from coffee hour to Sunday school to what the worship service would look like to how we greet people. You know, there are so many pieces for us to think about what Sunday morning will look like. We need to think about how the previous activities that we only offered in person might be accessed virtually so we can continue to draw that circle wide. And I think it's really important that we plan intentional community building activities for our congregation. We miss each other. I miss you. Carolyn misses you. We miss you desperately, and we know you miss each other. How are we going to spend some time getting to know each other again, reconnecting, bringing in the new people who have joined us since this pandemic has happened? How is it that we are going to be family together? We need to plan intentionally for that.
Thank you, Molly. The second one was nominated by Bernie, and Bernie's kind of a shy guy, so I interviewed him, and I'm going to try to explain what I heard when I talked to him, and then Bernie, I'm going to give you a chance to layer on top of that if you want to. So the title of it is Develop and Implement a Post-Pandemic Recovery Plan. So really what we're saying here is this one looks at, you know, how do we as Orléans United Church make it through the pandemic? You know, obviously we want to survive, but I think we want to do more than just survive. We want to pivot, to innovate, to adapt, and thrive. Another big question is, how do we think things will open up? And this is one of the questions that came into us from a few of the people who are on the webinar today. So we do have a Q&A session coming up later on where we'll get into some of the details about what our thoughts are there. And there will be a point where we're going to be ramping up. I think this could become more as a surprise than something we can predict, because that's been the nature of the pandemic. We keep getting hit by these unexpected events. And I think at some point, we're suddenly going to realize, yeah, we need to get organized. We need to get in there and dust off the pews and all of that, and open up the classrooms again. So we need to start thinking ahead to that. And then how will we roll out our programs? In the near future anyway, we're probably going to have to continue to do a certain amount of physical distancing and wearing masks and stuff like that. So there's some questions around there. So Bernie, is there anything else you'd like to add to this? Because again, you were the person who thought of this one.
Excuse me. I guess my feeling on this one was it came from Molly's. When I read what she was talking about, and I said, well, we've got to look at how are we going to open up the church. It seems to me that our main focus this year is how do we get through the pandemic if we get through it. And I don't think the pandemic is here one day and it's gone the next day. I think there's a process, and I think that process is going to be long. And I personally believe that it's, as Ron indicated, and as you hear on the news programs, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs before we get out of this. So I think primarily I'm saying we got to stay on top of what's happening, and then how are we going to adjust to a post-pandemic environment? And some of the stuff that Molly's talking about is, are we going to have a virtual and an in-house service whenever we get out of this? And if we do, I guess from a finance perspective, from a narrow-minded finance perspective, what's the impact on revenues? Right? And how are we going to manage that? You will see in today's YouTube, thanks to Dave, there was a mention about congregational offerings. Okay, and so what we're trying to do is say, how do we make sure that we can continue to have our revenue streams? Because as Alex mentioned in some of his presentation, rentals are way down and fundraising's way down. Well, if they stay down, how do we make up for it? So that's the type of thing that I've been concerned about. That's it.
Thank you, Bernie. Molly, is there anything else you want to add to? Okay, all right. And so you may be sort of sensing that, gee, these two goals look, kind of the same. And, my feelings about them were that the first one, is more, on the spiritual side of things, worship and that sort of thing. It's kind of the way I look at that one. And that the goal number 2 is on the temporal side, if we can use sort of a fancy word. And the two, and I anticipate we'll have, a team working on goal number 1 and another team working on goal number 2, and that those teams are going to have to talk periodically, and we're going to see how these things knit together. So, so just continuing on then. So then there were 2 others that came up,
Sorry,
which
hello?
Yeah.
Dave Clemens here. There's a question from Luc Lemadeleine.
Yeah, can we hold that till we get through the whole presentation, Dave?
Okay.
Thanks. So these 2, I've given the fancy name enablers. And what do I mean by that? Well, these are the things that we need to do to be successful in achieving, the goals number 1 and 2, and the overall health and the prosperity of the church. So the first one has to do with increasing the awareness among our congregation and beyond about what's going on at OUC. And then the second one is looking at innovative ways that we can generate revenues. And so, if we have a bigger flock and we have more money, obviously we can do more, we can be even more successful. And again, when Lynn did her analysis, once again, these two map back to all 5 of our ministries. So those are the priorities. And now a word on capital expenditures. And I'm using the abbreviation CapEx just so it fits into the title of the slide here. So the main message is that because of the situation we're in, we only have a limited capacity in terms of the budget for what we can do in 2021. So we are suggesting that the envelope be 15,000. Now we've actually already spent 3,300 on new islands in the kitchen, and we completed that project at the end of January. Now, so why did we do that? Why did we not wait until today's meeting to have the go on that project? Well, we had the opportunity come up in January to get this work done. So there was a contractor who was available. We put together a proposal. It was presented to council, and we discussed this issue of should we wait or not. The overall feeling was that the church is empty because of the lockdown. We're not too sure what's going to happen after the lockdown. So let's just go ahead and get this work done and ask for forgiveness. So let me give you some more background on this. So this is what the islands looked like before the work was done. And the impetus for getting them replaced is right there in the picture, and that the surfaces on these islands are not ones that you can clean, in a viable way, and we would run the continued risk of public health issue here. If we had a health inspector coming in, they would not be very happy about what they were seeing. So that's kind of item number 1. Item number 2 is last year, you will recall at the ACM, there was quite a bit of interest in funding renovations to the kitchen. And a few weeks later, the pandemic hit and we put the brakes on the capital budget. Later on in the year, we raised a little bit of money through donations, and we at least went ahead with the upgrades to the electrical capabilities and lighting in the kitchen, and got that issue off the table. And people have been pretty happy with the result of that. So this is kind of another step in a multi-year renovation project, but this is probably as far as we're going to go this year. And this is how it now looks. And so not only do we have safer work surfaces, we have the better storage for the recycle bins and the garbage bins and the benches. So you have a less cluttered workspace. So the people that have seen it are pretty enthusiastic by what they've seen. So that's it on the kitchen islands. And then, so what do we do with the rest of the the money. So there's a little over 11,000 left over of the 15,000. My feeling is that the next priority, if you will, should be to consider replacing the air conditioning system that failed in August of 2019, the one that's on the north side of the building. And why is that important? Well, a couple of things. Canadian Blood Services have an agreement now with us to run 5 blood donation clinics and maybe as many as 8 at OUC. They had one on January 27th, I think it was. And they require that the hall temperature be controlled in the 19 to 21 Celsius range. So when they're there in July and August, we're going to need air conditioning, I think, to achieve that particular requirement. Layer on top of that, with the likelihood that by July and August, we're going to have lots more people vaccinated, I would expect we're going to see even more activity in the church and in the hall starting sometime in that time period. So again, in order to accommodate that, I think we need to be paying attention to what extent we can control the temperature in that end of the church. Okay, so now let's hear the questions.
Okay, again, it was Luc Lemadeleine who asked, it was really on the first 2 bullets. Have plans already been considered on how we will address these goals? Committees, participants in those committees, innovative workshop exercise, etc. And I think he's volunteered to be helpful, to help out if he can.
Yeah, and thank you for that offer, Luke. No, we haven't actually got to the point of mobilizing. There are some preliminary ideas on solutions. We're didn't want to get into those details today and perhaps preempt some other ideas that people might have as how we can do it. So in the next few weeks, we'll be putting out the call for people who would like to participate in these working groups. I can just say from my experience in chairing the reopening task force, that can be, a very rewarding thing to do during this pandemic. My observation is the people on the reopening task force found that they had a place where they could contribute their ideas and their time, in a very useful way. And we did a lot. We had some fun doing it. So I think working on these 2 goals should be something similar.
And Craig Bader posed a question. Again, it may be more to the budget than anything else, but he wanted to know how much is the north end AC repair likely to cost?
Yeah, that's another good question. So in when was that? I think it was in the fall of 2019. We asked that question of Standard Mechanical, who are the folks that take care of our HVAC systems. So we got a quote of $10,000 plus HST, so 11,300. We would need to go and renew that, go back and say, so is that number still valid or has it changed? But it should be in that kind of ballpark. What is there now is like a 34-year-old system and I think we told this story last year at the ACM, that is using the obsolete coolant. So we will, we'll obviously this will modernize our air conditioning on that end of the building. Any other questions?
No, I don't see any other questions on that. No.
Okay. Well, thank you. So Dot, I'll give it back to you.
Great, thanks, Ron. That was a fabulous presentation, and I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to informing the council priorities. And it's not only councils; it's all our priorities and for all the ministry teams to work on over this next year. There is no need for motion on the council priorities. Rather, it's the next step, which is to look at our proposed budget. So with the council priorities, this is what we believe is that we presented them, and hearing no real objections to your discussion, we're taking that as your endorsement. So the next part is to look at our budget for 2021, the proposed budget. Bernie, you've been waiting anxiously to do that. I'll give you a few moments to share screen, and
Okay, I'm in the process.
mantle is yours. Yeah, I hear you.
So do we need some background music?
Oh, no, we could just chit chat away here.
Okay, is it there?
No, not yet.
Oh, because I've got it up.
Touch the start screen, shares the share screen button.
I have.
So you need to go into, it's usually in the lower right-hand corner.
I did do that, Ron.
To do that, and it's not showing up.
Just let me see here. Okay, share screen. Is it there now?
It's coming now,
It's
Bernie.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
There we
got it.
go.
There it is.
I'm gonna start your slideshow.
Yeah, Dave Clemens tells me to hit F5.
If not, go along the top button where it says slideshow,
Yeah,
and got it. Keep going.
okay, you got it now?
Yep, perfect. Beautiful.
Okay, I'm ready to go. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd now like to go over the 2021 proposed budget. And I guess, first of all, what I'd like to say is we're limited in our ability to interact this year. And so you may not be able to fully voice any questions or concerns that you may have, but please feel free at any time to email me at my address, which is at the bottom of the slide. I would be most welcome to provide you any responses that I could. Now, the first big problem this year, as you can appreciate, is the uncertainties in developing a budget in normal times. And it's been magnified this year, of course, because of COVID. And, you know, I put some questions down here, the impact of the vaccine, when will we be fully open? When will most of the congregation be comfortable returning? When will our renters be comfortable using the facilities? And one of the big questions is, will all previous renters return post-pandemic? So those are a lot of questions we're going to have to ask ourselves as we move through this year. Now, the major budget assumption, and Luke asked the question, and this is one that people may not agree with because you would have differences of opinion all over the map. For the purposes of the budget, we have assumed that the church will be closed with minor exception for the year. And what does that mean? It creates one certainty as far as the budget, which is unusual to have a certainty with a budget. The budget will need to be updated as we move through the year and we see how things are progressing from a pandemic perspective, also from government assistance. So we've taken a cautious approach. We said the pandemic will be with us for the entire year. The major impact from our revenue side is the in-house church services. Although, as Alex mentioned in his report, the offerings have been pretty good considering the pandemic. Use and occupancy were way down and will continue to be way down, and fundraising is pretty limited. Now, what I'll do is go through the operating revenues with you. But what you will notice as I go through these slides, in the first column is the 2021 budget lines, where on the columns to the right are basically the actuals and budget for 2020 and what we did in 2019. And these are generally in agreement. The numbers are definitely in agreement with Alex, although there's some breakdown which is slightly different. But you will see like the general offerings. What did I do for those? Basically what I did is looked at the 2020 offerings that had come in during the pandemic. Now the pandemic started in March, but I could only start on the 1st of April. So I took the offerings that came in from 1 April to the 31st of December, came up with a per month average offerings throughout the pandemic, and then said, okay, we will assume for next year that it will be the same. So we just multiplied it by 12. The use and occupancy has been determined on a very limited rentals of church facilities. Ron has talked, there's the Canadian Blood Services, which will bring us in, what was it, Ron, 9,500 or something like that?
Yeah, it's almost $1,000 per rental, and we've got 5 committed.
So 5,000, yeah.
Yeah,
and
with
now,
maybe 3 more.
Yeah, and now he's telling me people are phoning. The trouble is if we open the church and we don't get our major renters back, like the SDA and the Coro Vivo, our custodial costs may go up as much as our rental revenue is concerned. So the big question is going to be the major rentals, which is the Seventh-day Adventist and Coro Vivo. Now the fundraising, the assumption is the online bazaar will be here again. The sale of grocery cards being done by Diane Davis, and the frozen berries being done by Joan Brocklebank, and they would be the only fundraising activities under the assumption of the church being closed. The other one is the federal government assistance, and there's a couple issues in this one. And as in Alex's report, if you had added up the numbers, you will have seen that the federal government contributed about $52,500 to us in 2020. Now, all but 10,000 of that was associated with some type of subsidy assistance, either the 10%, the 75%, or some varying percentage. But that was scaled back a bit at towards the end of 2020, because initially it started off at 75% and they dropped it back a bit. So it will most likely not bring in as much money this year as it did last year, but then that depends how long the pandemic is going to be with us. Right now, they've extended that program until June. So we don't know what will happen after June. Now, Alex talked about it. We did avail ourselves of the government loan program of $40,000. And of that 40,000, 10,000 of it is forgivable, provided we pay it the 30,000 back by the 31st of December, 2022. Now, the program has been extended. I'll be truthful with you here. It has now been extended by an additional 20,000. So we could request an additional $20,000 loan. Of that additional 20,000, 10,000 of it is forgivable. So in essence, what that would mean, you would have got $60,000, of which 40,000 is repayable. Now, the Finance Committee is now discussing, and we'll discuss at our March meeting, whether we believe that OUC qualifies for the additional amount. We have to demonstrate financial hardship. So that's what we're going to have to discuss. Now, I have not included in the budget anything with regards to going after the additional 20,000. Now, Sunday revenue that you see at the bottom, and Alex mentioned this too, that's primarily the rebate we get on our GST from year to year. And we expect it to be about the same as it was last year. Now, the operating expenses and salaries, and I hope this answers, I think it's some of Craig's question. The 2021 budget is set at just over almost 282,000, and it appears to be up substantially from 2020, and I'll explain why. And Alex alluded to it also. It is the largest expenditure. It's up 36,000. You got to remember, in last year's 245,000, there wasn't included a reimbursement of 14,600. So if you were to put those together, you'd be up at what, $260,000, that if it hadn't been for restorative care. There is in this year's budget a 2.7% increase in salaries. There is $4,500 in pandemic bonuses to the ministers and the music directors. And I mean, that's $1,500 each. And then there's a $1,200 increase in out of the office communications. So that's why the salaries and benefits budget is up. The next thing is the building and maintenance, including long-term debt. It's our second largest expenditure, and the costs have been trimmed back considerably to the 2020 level. As you can see, we pretty well put in what we spent in 2020. And a lot of that information has come to me through Ron. And the long-term debt costs are fixed. We're obligated to pay that about $19,000 a year. Now, administration, which is the third largest expense, there's little room to reduce this. It's primarily the UCC assessment, which is $17,500. And you can see the other items: office supplies, $2,800, service charges of $2,000, and staff retreat of $2,000. You'll find that the service charges has gone up because the number of people who are using Canada Helps, and we have to pay a service charge on any donations that come through Canada Helps. Now, the ministry programs, worship, learning, and care, the amounts that are shown are those as requested by the applicable committee, and they're coming in about $20,500, and that's about $1,000 less than the 2020 budget. The capital investments Ron talked to. I put down $3,500 to redo the counters in the kitchen, and $11,500 contingency. And Ron has indicated that he thought that would be used for the air conditioner. The outside ministry, this information is provided from the Outreach Committee, and their budget this year is $41,000, which whatever we receive, we send to M&S. So when we add all that together, what are we looking at? We're looking at a approximately $43,000 deficit. If we stay closed for the entire year, then government assistance will be a significant determinant. Remember, I told you the government program right now for the wage subsidy is only up until June. Whether there will be assistance after that, we don't know yet. Now, what I will say to you all is, although that deficit looks large, and it is large, we have sufficient cash resources to absorb that in 2021. And I would say that thanks to previous year's surpluses occasioned by some unexpected revenue sources, such as bequests, Alex mentioned one just over $12,000 a year ago, December. Unexpected parking lot rentals. We were able to rent the parking lot out to the housing co-op this past summer, which brought in about $6,000 that we weren't expecting. The restorative care payments of $14,600 and government assistance. And you add all those together, it comes to somewhere around $75,000. Now, normally, and as you can see too, the actual budget bottom line normally comes in much better than budget. Now, to be truthful with you, I would expect it the same this year. The only thing is, I would caution, sorry, but I don't think it'll come into the same degree of variance. Mainly salaries and benefits are mostly fixed costs. We don't have much option when we've set them. There are some non-fixed portions that undoubtedly will come in lower, and I would estimate they could come in anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 less. Now, the building and maintenance costs have been trimmed to the amount in 2020, so should not be much room to reduce those. But also remember, Ron was talking about people phoning and the phone ringing off the hook for rentals. Well, if we start getting the rentals, the buildings and maintenance costs are going up. And what we hope for is that the building and maintenance costs will not go up as much as the rental revenue. Now, the administration costs about $1,600 more than last year, and it generally comes in close to budget. So there shouldn't be much room for savings there. Now, one thing that tends to come in lower and has consistently over the years is the ministry programs tend to come in lower than budgeted. And based on previous years, I could see them coming in anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 less. Now, the major determinant, I think, this year is going to be, well, the revenues themselves, how well they stay up. And government assistance will be the major determinants as to how well we do in 2021. Now, are there any questions or anything?
Yes, I'd like to go back. Craig Bader had 3 questions that he asked. I believe the first 2 may have been answered. I've already sent a note back to him asking if in fact it was satisfied or not. But just a quick review, he wanted to know the line item M&P salaries and benefits. I think it's on slide 7.
Yes.
281,829. He wanted to get a breakdown of that item. I think you did provide that.
Yeah, I thought I had. If he wanted a further breakdown, I give it to him, but any further breakdown would be given it by individual pretty well.
Okay. You know, he says he's okay with those first 2 questions. He just
okay.
responded back to me. The third question, the second one was on the capital investments, and I believe you answered that, and he said yes. The third question was the proposed operating deficit is 42,877. That's 11% budgeted revenues and substantial increase over the 2020 deficit. What is the reasoning behind the proposing such a large deficit? And does council or finance committee have a formal or informal policy for a guideline for the maximum budget deficit that could be suggested either in terms of absolute dollars or a percentage of revenues or reserves or some other yardstick?
Excuse me. I think really what we did this year is, we put together the numbers, and then and once you put down the revenue and you take the expenditures off it, you come to a bottom line. And we basically went what people were asking for, because we don't have a lot of room to maneuver, because a good portion of your costs are fixed, as I mentioned, with regards to salaries and benefits, and they comprise some 60 to 70% of the expenditures of the church. So what we did is when we came out with that bottom line, and that bottom line has, from our initial start of the budget, has been whittled down maybe $10,000. We were up at 52 or something like that. And looking at it and making some other assumptions, we brought it down to about the 43,000. But when we saw that 43,000, what we did is look, can we absorb it? And as I mentioned to you, the financial resources are such that I'm quite confident, and the committee is quite confident, that we can absorb a deficit of $43,000 for the year, thanks to the, as I mentioned earlier, for the surpluses we've built up in the preceding years. So I guess a lot of people will use the word reserves. I tend not to use that word, but we had sufficient reserves. We have sufficient reserves to meet the challenges of the budget of 2021. So we don't have a formal policy. We just look at the absolute numbers and say, what do we have in terms of cash resources? And in fact, there was a question that came in before today asking about the how come the debt increased, or and talk about the debt increase. Well, I do have a slide which will help show people how we can weather the 2021. So I'm going to try to go to that slide. I got to stop share and start share again, Ron?
No, you can just go and open up the presentation that has that story in it, and then
Is that showing?
we're still seeing your original presentation. So you just need to click on your new presentation and it should show on your screen.
Yeah, well, that's what I did, Ron.
Okay. Then the next option would be to stop share.
Yeah, I think,
and then restart.
I think what he's got here, Ron, is he's using the file rather than the screen to show it.
Okay.
So he's opened the file. So yeah, you're going to have to close, Bernie. You're going to have to close that presentation and then select
Share
and share it. Yeah.
And while Bernie's working on that, I'll just indicate that another risk mitigation strategy is one of those priorities we spoke to, which is to focus on how we can generate new revenues, so
is this one showing now?
it is.
Okay.
You're good.
So
Yep.
as I said, the question was about our increased debt. And there's no doubt we increased the debt. But let me put it in some perspective for you. We increased it by $30,000, but we got 40,000 for the 30,000. So we got an additional 10. But when I looked at what we own or what we have and what I believe are cash resources, those things that can be easily converted into cash when we need them, you will see that at the end of 2020, we got $336,000. At the end of 2019, we got 265,000, almost 266. And then if you go and look at, say, well, what do we owe? Because that's what's important, not just what you have. So you look at the total short-term debt, which is basically accounts payable and that money that's been given to us for a specified purpose, for which we can't spend until we use it for that purpose. But you'll notice the short-term debt is about the same as last year. But where you will see the difference is where you look at your long-term debt. And the surprising thing is, yeah, the federal government loan here is 30,000, but look at the church extension loan. It's gone down by $17,000 for the year. And if you look at the total long-term debt, yeah, it's about 13,000 higher than it was at the end of 19. And the total debt is about the same amount. But look at the bottom number, the net cash position. We are about $57,000 better now than we were at the end of 2019. So that's why we're saying we can sustain the deficit into 2021. Okay. Now, are there any questions on that?
No, John Gibson just wrote in here under the chat that Greg's question on guideline for size of deficit, he may be asking for a fiscal anchor. I suggest there is none codified, but de facto practice over the last several years has been to seek nil deficit where possible. Current conditions are extraordinary. I personally do not see a need to impose a formal fiscal anchor or limit budget or limit for budget purposes. Just a comment. I have two other questions here on the budget presentation. One is from Luc Lemadeleine. I think this is a reasonable approach for 2021 budget. Additionally, another consideration is that beyond us not wanting anyone to contract COVID, the liability risk is real, and as most insurance policies won't cover liability exposures resulting from the transmission of communicable disease. This could pose a real financial risk to the church should someone contract COVID. Wearing my insurance hat, he says.
Well, and one thing I'd mentioned to Luke, not talking about the COVID situation, but Alex, you can help me here. I believe our insurance premiums have really increased this year. I think they went up well over $2,000. And talking to the CFO at the United Church, he indicated that was standard right across the system. And it doesn't expect there will be an increase this year, but not as significant as it was in 2020.
So I'm just going to send a note asking if that has satisfied his question.
Okay.
Then I have one here from Anne-Marie Humanuk, who was responding to the Canada Helps. Does that mean donors get a better bang for the buck if they just ask PAR to make the donation for them? i.e. ask Winston to add a one-time donation for the extra donation?
I can answer that one. Canada Helps essentially just charges the credit card fee, not a whole lot more. And it's more because people are using credit cards with Canada Helps, whereas PAR and writing a check and e-transfers, whatever you send us, we get. Whereas Canada Helps has the credit card fee. So it's not so much, I guess it is bang for your buck. We're happy to get money any way we can. So whatever's convenient, people, you know, if they love using their credit card, then that's fine. They put it on their credit card, $100. We get about 97, and we're happy to get it. And so, take your pick. It's a cost of doing business.
Just to add to Alex's point too, and that's when we introduced e-transfers, they have been extremely successful. Since April, $34,000 of the offerings have come in through e-transfers. So almost 11 or 12% of the offerings have come in from e-transfers, and e-transfers don't cost us anything.
Thank you, Bernie and Alex, for handling our proposed budget. I'm just going to make one confirmation now out to the help desk. Are there any other questions related to the proposed budget?
There are no more questions at this point.
Well, then I'm going to say what a fabulous proposed budget, and compliments to the Finance Committee and everyone that has contributed to that. There being no more questions on the floor and having had an active discussion on the proposed budget, I would like to call for the motion that the 2021 proposed budget made by Bernie be considered. It's moved by Bernie Eisner. It's seconded by Ron Hunt. The voting is now up on your screen.
Bernie, could you please stop sharing? This may block some people's view of the vote. Thanks.
And voting now is ongoing. So this is where you get the music. Do, 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 do.
Yeah, I think you can stop the music now.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. Look, we have the motion is carried.
Oh, fabulous. This is the applause time. This is the applause. Well done. Our next order of business is the council slate for 2021. At this juncture, I'm going to ask Ron to, as he's getting ready, we're going to put up, I'm going to do a little talking first, then we're going to put up Rob's, then Debbie's, then the overall council slate, if you could do that for me.
Okay.
Okay, so as I'm chit-chatting, the first point that I wanted to make is that council does not work alone, as evident by the panelists here today. We're very much founded on the strength and the work and the participation of everyone. This year, we are very happy that we've had so much support and that people have just done so much to contribute to our efforts. Council is aligned with the ministry teams. Every member of council has a ministry team that they join up with so that we can make sure that we bring your insights into council at every occasion and every meeting. Now, on that note, I would like to make some acknowledgements. The first acknowledgement is to say a special thank you to Michael Parsh for his 10 years as a youth ministry leader. Michael has mentored a generation of youth even after his own children left for university. And this would be the time that everybody would stand and applause and let Michael know that how much he's appreciated. He's moved on. I think you're allowed to do that when your children are no longer youth. And so thank you, Michael, for all of that. So applause, applause. We acknowledge with gratitude Dave McWilliams for his 13 years with Outreach. He came on with Outreach when Pat Ulrich stepped aside, the late Pat Ulrich, and he spent a lifetime as chair, 10 years as chair of Outreach, and as many years being the voice of our Minute for Mission announcements. And so Dave is taking a well-deserved sabbatical. From council, we have departing member at large, Debbie Birch, who I'd like to let everybody know is going to be a first-time grandma in May. So she's readying herself for that new joy. She's also still a representative to EOR. So people just realign their volunteer efforts in ministries, and she's realigning hers so that she's available for the new arrival. I also like to acknowledge departing from council as we look at the new slate. John Gibson, our past chair. John came to council as following being part of the stewardship review as to how we're going to make our ministry teams and do stewardship at our church about 6 years ago. He transitioned very quickly to council as the chair, and with our succession planning, we'll now step aside and have a break from council and do other ministry activities. And you should know that John is very much engaged. He does the bicycle swap in the spring, among many other things. And John, I truly thank you for your leadership and for your wisdom on council. Now, with the new slate, I am going to call on Ron to introduce the nominee for property chair. I see that at the bottom. Ron, you need to unmute.
I'm giving up the chair of property committee for Lent and beyond. So we're very fortunate to have Rob Orkin, who has agreed to take on the role of chair of property, and got a little bit of background here on Rob for those of you who don't know him. So he's been at OUC for quite some time, since the fall of 1996, and has been very involved at the church as an organizer of the first men's retreat in 2003. He was on council from 2007 to 2013, first as a vice chair and then as chair of council from 2009 to 2011. And then since that time, he's been the team lead for the worship coordinator team. So that's the group that scurries around and gets the sanctuary and the hall ready for the worship service and coffee time afterwards. And he's been involved in various building related projects such as the tower takedown. And I asked Rob, so what are your thoughts going into the role of chair of property? And this is what he said, that he we'll be looking at the current church assets and building with a view to developing a plan for the next few years. So, and I'm also happy to say that Rob has gotten involved with the property team, attending our meetings since December. And so we've already got the handover well underway. So thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Ron. Could you put up now the nominee for the incoming chair of council? So I'm delighted to introduce to you Allison Sales, which I'm sure you all know. The photo helps when we're not in person, just to give you a reminder. Allison has attended OUC for nearly 19 years, and she first started helping in the nursery. She moved on to the outreach committee for about 9 years, and I worked with her more during Women's Retreat, organizing those events, and really saw her leadership abilities and how well she makes relationships truly wonderful. Started with Joyful Yarn Ministry 7 years ago, and became a licensed lay worship leader 5 years ago after a 2-year part-time study program. Her thoughts on becoming incoming chair of council: through my own, in her words, through my own experience, I know the value of being asked to serve in various capacities. We just don't know where it will lead you for ourselves or others. And then she adds, serving on council executive is new to me, but I'm confident that my life skills and work experience will serve me well. I intend to learn from the experience of the serving council executive while I still classed as an incoming. Yeah, I like that remark. So those are the two key nominees. I have one other, if you put up the slate, and that is the chair. And last year, as incoming chair, it's understood that Ron will become chair of council with your election. But I think it's an appropriate time for me to say a few words. And I'm going to say that, Ron, you've been absolutely a blessing to our congregation. Your leadership is absolutely first class. Your wisdom, sage counsel, we could not do without. You certainly, over this past year, have taken us as the property chair to the reopening task force, closing down, standing up, all that flux that we went through in the unknowns. And in the last months, as I needed to have surgery and start chemo, that you stepped up as the acting chair. And obviously, by the quality of this ACM, you have to know he is more than ready for the job. And so thank you, Ron. I look forward to being the past chair and engaging in council exec. The past 2 years have been interesting. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Thank you very much for your kind words. And I guess you could say in the last 12 months, I was sent to finishing school.
Yeah, I bet. I also want to take this opportunity as I step aside as past chair to say thank you to council. I've been blessed by your guidance, and I look forward to serving on council again this year. And on that note, the slate is up. I think it's time for the motion. I have moved by Ron, which means I guess you'd say you're going to accept stepping in as chair, should the vote give that. Seconded by John Gibson. Now I'm calling for the vote polling to approve the nominees and the council slate for 2021.
And the votes are coming in. And the seconder there should say John Gibson. So that was a mistake I made.
Oh, okay. Or it could have been me too. Yeah, in my
So I think the voting is finished, and I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So the motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, the next order of business, and we're nearing the end of our agenda, so thank you for hanging in there, folks, out in virtual land, is the questions that we received either through chat and how we're going to respond to those. The first question that we received is on the reopening in the post-pandemic. I think in the main that we've responded to this through the presentations, through our council priorities, that we're going to look at that. In some, what conditions would permit OUC to reopen for general use? Intuitively, I think we can say 2021 is probably going to be a bit of the same as last year. As public health conditions advise, we might be able to do some small group things. We're certainly going to look to have more outdoor, safer gatherings, but I don't think that we can answer those questions. We simply have to continue to use the model that we used last year with our reopening task force and see what we can do. The next question is, what programs and activities will be provided during the shutdown? Well, we've done an awful lot, and we will continue to do things virtually on Zoom. And I think we've answered that question. The next one is on worship services. I will pass that to Molly, if you would like to handle that one.
That's a super question that we continue to be asking, and it certainly is one of the impetuses for that goal number 1 that we had talked about. I think what we can say is that we recognize the value and importance of online worship and continuing online worship. So whatever worship will look like in the future, we imagine it to be a combination of in-person and virtual worship. That might mean that there are some gathered in the sanctuary and we offer a worship service that then has pieces that are dropped in and we all watch together on a screen, and we then broadcast all of that. I mean, we're not quite sure what it's going to look like, but we know that it will be some kind of a blended hybrid worship at this point.
Thanks, Molly. I just want to add a point on the first question: what conditions would permit reopen? I wanted to note that there is a possibility this year that if we get that opportunity to open the building, that we'll certainly probably have an open house day or something where people can come back into the church and simply just to see it, sit in the sanctuary, see the changes we've made to the kitchen, just to step inside the building and to feel at home yet again. So we're going to look at things that will just make us feel that we're coming through this. Yes, Molly, go ahead.
I'd also say that we hope as the weather gets nicer and we are able to gather outside, that there will be outdoor opportunities. We already have some dates set aside for, we're imagining something like a campfire vespers or something like that. But we imagine this spring, summer, and fall, there will be times to gather together for worship outside.
Excellent. Thank you. Next slide. Okay. Leadership, financial, and organizational questions. What kind of contributions or support would the leadership team like to see from OUC members in the next year? Well, from my perspective, I think we would really like to see some of our key ministry leadership positions filled. And there's a couple to mention. I would like to see, from my partnership, communications. Staying connected is still a priority goal. So we certainly would like to have a communications chair and have that ministry renewed so that it comes out strong in that post-pandemic year. So if that is something that moves you, please let us know. Outreach is another one that is now vacant, and it is also an opportunity, like we did with adult education and health promotions, to renew itself and transform it as to where it needs to be for 2022 and beyond. So outreach or community partnerships is time that may need to have a chair, but a chair that's looking to listen and do a strategic review as to where it needs to be in the future. So that's one that that should be looked at. Is there any others? Did I miss any? A youth leader, but I'll leave you to go have a conversation with Molly on that one, okay? Because that's her partnership. The next one is congregational connectivity and support activities. I think, I've missed a couple. How are we doing with regards to mission service? I believe that question's been answered. And the last one is, how is the chair position for the outreach committee determined? They are determined within our succession planning model. In other words, people, if you have a spirit moves you, you let your name come forward, and how you're interested in that. And from there, we look at the terms of reference for that job. We try to do some matching, and then there's a review within council, especially for the leadership positions. So that there's a process for that. So if that interests you, whoever asked the question, we're looking forward to volunteers, receiving volunteers. And the last one is support, care, and connections. I think I mentioned in the annual report all the communications activities and the staying connected things we're doing between the newsletters, the pastoral cares, the phone calls, and social media. We are doing everything we can and more. The next one, and that I think the two questions are the same: how to best care for our OUC staff during the next phase of this pandemic. Well, chocolate works for me. It's important. I think you noted in the finance side of the house that there was a bonus given, a pandemic bonus, a small token of appreciation that in no way matches the extraordinary amount of overtime hours our ministry staff have provided, and certainly the clergy and our revs. Rev Molly, Rev Carolyn, we are indebted to your long hours. I personally know that you go weeks without a true day off, without receiving a text, a phone call, a Zoom thing from someone. So we know, and we very much appreciate the service that you're giving us, and we pray for you for strength, okay? And please let everybody know, the staff know, that it's a tough haul. It's a long haul. The next one is plans going forward during COVID. I think that we've set that in our goals and our priorities over the next year. And is there anything else that needs?
No, that's it. You've covered them all. Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions out in virtual land from the help desk?
Maybe if we just wait a couple of seconds.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm also going to ask the panelists on those questions. I'm going to do a little bit of a round. Do you have any more comments that you wish to make as panelists today? I'll start with the clergy and work my way up to the top of the screen. So Rev Carolyn, you're good? Rev Molly? Lynn? You're on mute. You're on mute, Lynn.
Okay. We also want to thank Scott and Kim for all of their work this past year as well. and all the folks who do, all the elves. I would just say thank you to all the elves.
Oh, this is why Lynn is our secretary, because she makes sure I don't forget anything. Thank you for thanking the elves, right? Alex,
No, nothing.
Bernie? Thumbs up. Ron?
Couple of things. I'd like to just thank this panel for all of the work they did to get ready for today, including, our little rehearsal last week. Second thing is to say that this webinar, this meeting has been recorded. So if you know people that are sorry that they missed it and would like to have access to the recording, we will find a way to make that available. And the third thing is, now that I'm the chair of council, if you have any feedback at all, either on today or anything else, you have my email address, so don't be shy about using that. Back to you, Dot.
Thank you. I'm going to do two things for closing comments. I believe that we have come to the end of our agenda. We have one more activity, which is a moment of reflection, a closing prayer. And I would ask that Rev Molly, and then I will, at that point in time, have one more thing to say.
My pleasure. I hope that those who are listening to this are feeling as heartened as I am, as Carolyn and I are, as the clergy here at OUC. It is amazing, and I'll tell you what you aren't privy to are the conversations that Carolyn and I hear from our colleagues, what we read happening around this country, and how difficult it is for all of us in the middle of a pandemic, and ministers are no exception. But to hear what some people are dealing with in their congregations, and then to sit through these 2 hours of good news, of dedicated work, of Christ-centered, spirit-led ministry, of people who are devoting their hearts and their time to this congregation. It's enough to bring a minister to tears. And so we thank each and every one of you for the gift and privilege it is to serve with you. And in times like this, when it's especially difficult, we are especially reminded of how blessed we are to be at OUC. And so we thank our colleagues, we thank Kim, and we thank Scott, who are rocks and sources of great laughter and great support. And Carolyn and I are blessed with the gift of each other, and wouldn't want to go through this with anybody else, but we wouldn't want to go through this with any other congregation but all of you. So we thank you for that. And before I get too weepy, let's pray. Gracious God, we have seen evidence of your work among us in these past hours as we have lifted up the ministries of Orléans United, and as we have tried to be faithful shepherds and tenders of your work and witness in the world in this little corner of Orleans. We thank you for the flexibility and grace of a congregation who has been willing to pivot in ways they never imagined, and who have been able to find you and to find community in unexpected places. We thank you for the enthusiasm and positivity of all of the ministry leads, of the presenters today, of all of those people who believe in Orléans United and work to see its ministry and mission continue to be spread as we share God's goodness. We are thankful for the gift of government support. We are grateful to live in a country that is trying its best to manage this pandemic, and for the ways that we as a faith community have received support so that we might continue our work. We ask that you be with us all, that you continue to help us innovate, to be creative, to reimagine the possibilities that exist for us as a faith community. And we pray for the health and well-being of each and every person who is connected with Orléans United, those people who are in our hearts, those people who we miss seeing, those people who we know are being held gently, tenderly and preciously by you at all times. Thank you, God, for this gift and privilege of being your people in this time and this place, trusting that in all we do, we are not alone. We lift up the work and witness of this congregation in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Having, thank you, Molly. Having concluded all the items in our agenda, I can now declare the 2020 or annual congregation meeting adjourned. And with that, my closing words are, we are blessed, be a blessing. See ya.
Alex, have a safe trip back, Alex.